Hello, Gary Stearman with another Prophecy in the News update. It is Monday, May the 24th, and we're going to cover a little economic news today. As you know, Bible prophecy speaks of a rapidly changing economy in the latter days, an economy that changes from global national currencies to one currency, commonly known as the mark of the beast. But before that, and even before the tribulation, there are many Bible verses that point to a collapse of international economies that reformulate themselves into a global economy, and I believe we're seeing that happen right now. The Berliners, according to an article here in The Guardian, UK Guardian, are longing for a return to the Deutschmark. Yes, they are. They've been on the euro for years, and now the euro is dropping, and they want to return to the Deutschmark because they think of it as very much more stable. Quote, "We always knew in our heart of hearts that the euro would never be as solid as our Deutschmark. But we gave up our beloved currency, which was actually central to our identity, because we believed in the European project so fervently." You notice the past tense there. We believed, say the Germans. Well, the Berliner Republic is coming back and may soon be pushing its own banknotes into the marketplace. You know, all this happened when Germany bailed out Greece. The euro is now down sharply. According to the Associated Press, today, May 24th, the euro dropped sharply Monday after the weekend's de facto nationalization of a regional bank in Spain reignited fears about the continent's debt crisis and its impact on the banking system. What we're watching here, I think, is a collapse of individual national economies and a very rapid reformulation of economies that will go across borders. By early afternoon London time, May 24th, the euro was down 1.3%, coming in at $1.23. They're saying now that the euro may fall to reach parity with the dollar, which would be an absolute catastrophe for the Europeans. The latest bout of jitters arose in the wake of a decision by the Bank of Spain to take over regional savings bank Caja Sur after merger talks with Unicaja broke down. In other words, the central bank talks came to absolutely nothing. Caja Sur had to be closed down, and it says here that though Caja Sur is thought to account for less than 1% of Spain's financial assets, and the Spanish government insisted the country's financial system is absolutely solvent. To quote them, Caja Sur's effective failure is a timely reminder of the adjustment of many of the country's banks. It shows us what they're going to be going through following the collapse of economies in Europe. And by the way, you won't read this in the papers very often, but Europe is also suffering a collapse in what was a construction boom throughout Europe for the last several years. That has now fallen through. In the Bible, we read about a coming catastrophe. The four horsemen of the apocalypse, of course. The Antichrist rides forth, the horse of war, the red horse of war, followed by the black horse of economic collapse. Revelation 6, 5, and 6, "And when he had opened the third seal, I heard the third beast say, 'Come and see.' And I beheld, and lo, a black horse. And he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, 'A measure of wheat for a penny, 3 measures of barley for a penny. See that thou hurt not the oil and the wine.'" Now the indication here, it's called a penny in the King James. It's a denarius, which is would be a day's wages. And what we have here is a measure of wheat, about a quart for a day's wages, 3 measures of barley for about a day's wages, and see thou hurt not the oil and the wine. The oil and the wine are not going to be exactly in massive availability. So what we have here is an indication that there's going to be a financial meltdown, and people are talking about it. I'm looking now at a flyer that comes out from a very well-known group of financial analysts. And I'm not going to name them because the flyer is put out on a very private basis. But listen to this. According to these analysts, we believe, this is about the United States stock market, that stocks have entered a catastrophic wave down, which should be the third and most devastating wave of the grand supercycle bear market. This decline has the potential to be a nation-changing economic meltdown. We've been showing for months several dangerous, massive head and shoulders top patterns in major stock indices around the world. They go on to say, in answer to this question, what does this all mean? They say it likely means there will be a political reaction to this meltdown like nothing we've ever seen before. You see how aggressive the central planners have been, closing the barn door after the horse has gotten out, spending at least $2 trillion that we now know about, but are not sure where the money went. Well, multiply this by 1,000, we could see a reaction to a global economic meltdown that includes the following. Either by edict or by popular consent, after a successful propaganda campaign, we could see the joining of a Western economic intercontinental new sovereign nation, where European nations and North American nations join together, submitting their own sovereignties to a new nation, where former nations become essentially states within that new Western Alliance nation. We've been saying this for, I suppose, years. JR and I have talked about how at a certain point there would be a massive economic shift that produced the prophesied global socioeconomic systems that are described by Daniel and in the book of Revelation. And here we have some experts talking about the same thing. How soon will all this happen is a question that was put to these experts. Hard to say, they say, but the best guess is sometime between 2012 and 2016. I don't want to depress you, but we've all known that it's coming, and we need to be watching, and we need to be preparing for what's coming. We need to be in prayer about this thing and to hold our nation up in prayer, because we're in very tough, shifting times, just as the Bible has prophesied. Finally, there's somewhat lighter note to this. Back in 2005, Nouriel Roubini, and you may have heard about Professor Roubini because he's been everywhere in the news, he warned back in 2005 that housing prices in the United States were riding a speculative wave that would harm the economy. Well, at that time he was mocked and ignored, but his ideas were dismissed totally, just out of hand. You're an idiot, they said to Professor Roubini. Well, they don't say that anymore. He's now considered something of an economic clairvoyant. And recently he was on a television program, and somebody was asking him about buying gold, and he said rather flippantly, gold has no intrinsic value. If you're really worried about, say, inflation rising, I would buy Spam. You can eat Spam, he said. You cannot eat gold. Well, back in the days of JFK, it used to be called Camelot. In the administrations of the future, it may be called Spamalot. Gary Stearman with today's Prophecy in the News update.